as you can see here, that's a pretty aggressive, and it looks like a little elephant. So then, you know, I put some drums on top of that, and that section ended up being a little more like trappy, I guess. Hey there, fellow music creators. Andrew Southworth, GeneraStudios.com, here to teach you how to make better music and help you achieve your musical goals. So in this video, we're going to do something fun. I don't know if you know the channel or know the person, Andrew Huang, but he does these cool things called 4 producers flip the same sample. And as much as I would love to do that on his channel someday, that's not a reality right now. So I thought I'd just do it myself. And I would recommend you check out his video because the people on there, their versions are much better than how mine came out. I still think mine came out really cool, and I want to walk you through it and show you all the cool things I did, and then I'll show you the final track. But there's a lot of cool sound design things. Basically, the premise is that there's this single sample. In other versions, they've done a song, and they flip the song. In this one, they actually get a sample of a door, and they use that to make the entire track. So let's look at the screen.
He tweeted me this clip that he took on his phone. Yeah, so we're going to make music with that.
So as you can see, the sample's not very melodic. It's just a door closing and squeaking. So it's pretty challenging and interesting to deal with. There are some notes in there if you listen to the actual sample. There's the squeaks actually have different pitches, and there's rhythms. And then, of course, there's the smacking sounds, which you can use to turn into drums, and also even notes if you're really creative. So the first thing I did is I recorded this sample from the video and put it into Ableton Live, and that's what we have here. A little filtered, but still there. So then what I did is I started just copying things out and pasting them, stretching them, doing various things, and then layering them to actually make some drum sounds. So I layered 2 sounds to make this kick drum, and I layered 2 more sounds to make this snare, and then I have these open and closed hi-hat kinda. And then from that point, I just put them into a drum rack and process them further. So we have the kick, we have the snare, which of course there's some reverb and some other stuff happening, the hi-hat, and then the open hi-hat. And then somewhere along the line, I grabbed another sample and turned it into some kind of cymbal. I think this is actually the snare sample. And then I just stretched the heck out of it and pitched it differently and get kind of a cymbal thing. So at this point, I'm thinking, great, I have a drum set. So the first thing I actually did was I made a drum loop. And this is what that was. And it actually sounds pretty convincing. You wouldn't think I was using sounds from a door. You'd think I might be using like some cymatics pack or something. And I'll walk through the processing a little bit. On the kick drum, I applied a glue compressor and EQ, and then another glue compressor. Basically, I'm doing parallel compression here. I'm EQing it to get the sound I want, and then I'm doing some kind of long attack compression to kind of bring up the RMS value and make the drum actually sound a little bit louder. And then I go to the snare, and I'm doing the same thing with that RMS value compression. Then I'm also putting reverb on it to give it kind of like a thing at the end of it. The hi-hat was a little interesting because I have a lot of parts that are fast, and so I put an auto pen on it at 1/48 notes at 71% just to give it some movement in those fast parts, which ended up sounding pretty cool. You'll hear that later. The hi-hat, or the open hi-hat, actually just has some EQ and some reverb, and then we have this cymbal thing, which is also EQ, that kind of just some glue compression and then reverb. And that's each individual element of the drum kit. So next we go on to things that are on the whole drum bus. And here we have a glue compressor, which is just kind of gelling the whole thing together. And then I have a drum bus, which is mixed in at, a little over 50%, just providing some crunch and some boom because the kick drum wasn't as boomy as I wanted it to be. So next, of course, I needed some kind of melodic element. So what I did is I listened to this segment of the door, and I just grabbed one of them. I think I just copied it, pasted it, and then I just stretched it out. And I think I went in here. I might have changed it from Beats to Complex Pro. And then you have a long note. And this is what that ended up being. And I just pitched it differently. This is consolidated, so I can't actually show you exactly what I did on it, but that's pretty much what I did. So at that point, I went onto an instrument layer, and I grabbed a sampler. You could also do this with a simpler, but the sampler has a little bit more control. And so I'll go to the sample, and I just picked a random segment, and then I just, crossfaded it so that it would make like a continuous wave. I applied some spread. I applied whatever kind of envelope I wanted. I added a filter because there was some rumble when I started playing high notes. So I'll solo that particular layer, and I did double it, but I'll solo those 2 so you can hear it. And then that swells up. And so we have a synthesizer, which is awesome. So I did a lot of processing to make this sound better, at least try to make it sound better. I think in hindsight, what I should have done is I should have made more instruments up front, so that up front I would just make like a drum set, I would make a good bass, I would make a good synthesizer, a pad, and all those elements, and then focus on trying to songwrite. But I was really trying to do it all at once because this kind of sample flipping thing is a little new to me, at least this like complex of a sample. And so I did a lot of things after. So after the sampler, I have some EQ to filter it to how I want. I added some overdrive. I filtered it again. This is actually not even doing anything, so I'll delete it. And then I added some reverb. And then what I did is on the second version that's panned to the opposite side is it's EQ'd a little differently, and all the knobs are just kind of tweaked in different directions to give it a different sound in the stereo field. Now, this is actually done in quad, so if I look at these ones, they're kind of the same deal, but I made the root note different, and so what that does is basically just a different octave. And then aside from that, each one of these has different amounts of glide and stereo spread and different amounts of overdrive and EQ and reverb and erosion to try to just bring about as different harmonics in each one so that it didn't sound like the same instrument over and over again. And another thing I did that was to actually go to the sample and move the start and end points and crossfade around to, again, try to make it sound different. But in hindsight, what I should have done is made different instruments up front made of different parts of the sample so that I could actually have a more dynamic sound. Because when you listen to the whole track, you'll see what I mean, but it just sounds a little empty. Like it could use an actual synthesizer, like a Moog or something, played on top of it to thicken out the whole sound of the track. So since I was doing this all on the fly, I had that kind of synth build-up part, but then I wanted to make a completely different sounding thing that was based off of just the sample. And I came up with this wacky thing that ended up not making it in its final version, but I'll play you that. So what I ended up doing is I actually just got rid of that, and then I put it on its own layer, and by itself, I'll show you that. Let me just disable this, and that, and it sounded like this, which is a pretty cool sound, but I wanted to make it a lot more interesting. So I got this plugin called Looperator, and Looperator is incredible because what it does is it grabs your sample and chops it up and does all these things to it to make it sound more interesting, pretty much. And so that completely changes the vibe. And then under that, I also added these kind of extra chopped elements to make the track a little more spooky, I guess. And that's just copied segments, reversed, pitch shifted, and whatever. Just a bunch of reverb and a bunch of EQ to filter out the unwanted frequencies. As you can see here, that's a pretty aggressive, and it looks like a little elephant. So then, I put some drums on top of that, and that section ended up being a little more like trappy, I guess. And so that brings me on to the bass and lead line. So I'll show you this lead line here first. This is the same kind of deal. I grabbed one of those segments, I think the same segment. Again, hindsight 2020. And I just changed the envelope so that it was a little pluck sound, and I changed like the EQ and the overdrive, added echo, reverb, and some auto pan, compressed the hell out of it, and I got this cool little pluck thing. And the bass, again, you'll see the pattern here, same sample, different loop settings. This spectrum tool is actually how I tuned it because the tuner couldn't pick out the notes, so you just kind of see the peaks. If I play that solo, you'll see there's a peak. It's not a very defined peak, which I think is why the bass is so like wobbly sounding. It's not like a pure note. That's the reason why. But that allows you to pick out the notes. So that spectrum's a very powerful tool if you're doing any kind of sample manipulation like this. And aside from that, it's tuned down low. There's some compression, limiting, and submarine. If you don't know what submarine is, it's kind of new waves plugin that generates subharmonics. So for a sample like this, I was having trouble getting the low frequencies to shine through. So I used sub so I could have that like higher note and also bring it down and generate those harmonics. And it still was a little flubby, but it's what it had to be in this case. So next I wanted to make some kind of sliding lead line for the chorus, and I wanted to have that really like out of tune, aggressive almost dissonant, but still in pitch kind of sound. Think of like the lead line in Light from San Holo or something. So I got the same sampler, shifted the things around, EQ, overdrive, EQ, reverb, compressor, auto pan, all the same stuff I'm doing throughout this entire track. But the difference is this is in mono, so it can only play one note at a time. There's a stereo spread on as wide as possible. I also have it playing in octaves, and I made 3 of them, and each one of them is a little bit different to make it a little extra dissonant. So some are tuned a little this way and some tuned a little that way. So I'll play the first one. Then I'll play the second one. And then the third one. All 3. So it's a pretty dissonant sounding lead line. In the context of the mix, it sounds pretty cool. Again, not perfect, but pretty cool. Oh, and the last thing I forgot to point out is this little pluck line that's made off of the same thing as that trappy part. Alright, so I think that pretty much covers all the layers in the song. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I upload videos every single Tuesday and Friday. And check the link in the description to check out Andrew Huang's video, because they did an incredible job, a much better job than I did. And it's just an awesome video. Whether you want to hear the songs, you can learn a lot by seeing each producer's thought process and what they did. I certainly learned a lot as well. And there's also 2 or 3 other ones that are also freaking awesome, so I recommend you check those out as well. So I'm going to play you the whole song now, but I'm also going to link in the info bar another sound design type video that I've done that you might like. And I'm also going to link a poll where you can answer the question, do you like this style of sound design sample flipping video on my channel, or should I just let Andrew Huang keep doing it? It's a lot of fun for me, so I'd love to do this. I'll probably still keep doing it. It's a matter of if you want to see it or not. So check out that video, answer the poll, and without further ado, here's the whole song.